Okay, we'll see Oracle receivables. Same Oracle accounts receivables. So before we get into this receivables concept application, just my simple question is, what is the use of accounts payables? What is the purpose of accounts payables? What is the purpose of accounts payables?
To know the understanding of supply.
With accounts payables, we can make the payment. If you want to make the payment, you should maintain the invoice. If you want to maintain the invoice, you should communicate with the purchasing department. That connectivity also you can establish with the purchasing department. The complete process flow you can manage that. See, primarily activities wise, through payables, accounts payables, we can maintain the invoices and we can process the payments. To simplify that, the purpose, simply I can say, with the payables we can maintain the supplier liability. That is the actual purpose. Based on that only we'll be making the payments. Okay, the primary activities are invoicing and payment. Okay, we'll just create the purchase invoice and we'll make the payment. Okay, so that is the purpose. When you talk about receivables, okay, when you talk about receivables, don't take any point, I'll just give you another point. So in receivables, what we already discussed, O2C cycle, right? As per O2C cycle, what activities we do primarily in receivables? We'll create the sales invoices, and we'll create the receipts. Whenever you do whenever your order management department process the sales and all, based on that sales, we'll record the sales invoices, and the moment we get the payment from customer, that will be recorded in the system as a receipt. Okay, so basically those two are primary activities. Okay, are primary transactions which we record in the receivables. Okay, so fine. So when you talk about payables, what we are doing, we are primarily dealing with invoice creation and payment creation. So simply you can say in payables we have two workbenches. One is invoice workbench, other one is payment workbench. With invoice workbench, we can create and maintain the invoices. With the payment workbench, you can maintain and process the payments. Okay, so that's what we can do. In the same way, receivables, first we'll see how many workbenches we have. Workbench means it's very simple. So which will allow us to perform some work. Which work we are going to perform, based on that only we have naming convention. Invoice workbench, that means the work which we can perform related to invoices. You may create invoice, or else you may see the invoices, you may do some changes to invoices. Invoice related process, everything can be handled through invoice workbench. In the same way, payment workbench, if invoices are available, the invoices you can get selected into payment workbench, you can make the payment, or else you can take some actions on that payments. What are the payments you did? You may cancel, or you may void, or certain activities you can account it. So such kind of activities you can perform only from payment workbench. Okay, so some relevant work based on workbench, the relevant work you can perform within the workbench. There's already we discussed the simple point. The primary activities in receivables are supplier customer invoice, or say sales invoice, anything you can call sales invoice, and receipt creation. Apart from that, we can perform some other activities also, but primarily these two activities. First we'll talk about what are the workbenches we have. Based on that, we'll start understanding one by one. Okay, just make a note, we have four workbenches in receivables. We have four workbenches. Okay, we have four workbenches in receivables. Those are transaction workbench, receipts workbench, collections workbench, and bills receivables workbench. Okay, in receivables we have four workbenches: transaction workbench, receipt workbench, collections, and bills receivables workbench. So transactions, receipts, collections, and bills receivables workbench. What is the meaning of workbench here as per the application? Simple. It's all about classifying the business activities or process. Here you can understand as a process. I mean, we'll do the different process, invoicing, billing, a transaction process means the sales invoice process, right? And the receipt process, another process, also collection related activities. We'll discuss detail level. So workbench means the work, whatever we are doing, that we are classifying. This is related to what? The relevant work only you can process by using the respective workbench. Now we'll talk about these workbenches. What is the purpose? So high level I'll explain, then we'll go one by one detail level. It's a very simple point. You can give the definition because we discussed about payables. What is the use of transaction workbench? Yeah, tell me like, what is the use of, see, the logics we have to apply, it's not a great logics and all. What is the use of invoice workbench? Same terms we are using. By using the invoice workbench, you can create and maintain the invoice. Here term will be changed. Now tell me, what is the use of transaction workbench? With the transaction workbench, you can create and maintain the transaction. That's it. Now you can give the definition for all, right? May not be all. Receipts also you can give now. What is the use of receipt workbench? Receipt workbench, you can create the receipts and you can maintain the receipts. You can manage the receipt related information. That's it. And collection workbench, here it's not like creating the collections and all. Okay, here, so it's very simple. I have some few invoices which I created in the transaction workbench, or else maybe imported from other application that we'll discuss detail level. We have few transactions. The customer has to pay after 10 days, 15 days, 20 days. Then what we have to do?
Based on due date.
Yeah, tell me. See, we sold to, I mean, our sales department sold some material, provided some service to the customer. Now we have those invoices with us. Say we are working for receivables department. So definitely we'll be working on receivables application if company is going to use Oracle receivables. So in that case, what we will do, like I'm just working in receivables. I got some sales invoice. We have some sales invoices and all. Customer has to pay within 10 days. Then what else we have to do apart from that? Okay. When you get the payment, we will be creating the receipt. Till before we get the payment, what we'll be doing?
Based on the due date, we intimate the due date.
Yeah, intimation, just communication with the customer. Otherwise, if you forget, damn sure they'll be forgetting forever, right? So that is the reason you have to keep in touch with the customer, saying that you will be sending the statements. Okay, so there are multiple transactions. You will be sending the statement. Okay, these are the transactions you did with us. This is the due date. Or else you'll be sending some reminder letters to the customer and they'll be calling. Okay, so it's all about, we'll be having some communication. We'll be having some communication. What purpose you are communicating with the customer? To collect the payment. Before you go on to collect the payment, okay, for payment collection, what are the activities you are doing, all comes under collection. Okay, to perform all those that kind of activities only classified into collections workbench. Through collection workbench, what you can do, you can manage all the customer related communications. Like maybe you may just generate some reports which will intimate the customer, saying that how much they have to pay, when they have to pay. You may send some statements, and you may send some reminder letters, and you will be in the collection process. You will be managing your collectors, right? There'll be collectors. It's not like just virtual like system, like physical collectors will be there, right? So they'll take care of the collection process. If customer is going to customer has to pay within 10 days, your collection team should work on that process, where they'll be sending the reminders. Say customer on due date also customer is not paying, still they have to keep in touch with the customer, saying that they have to pay at least now as early as possible, otherwise some interest will be applicable, late payments. So right, once sale is happened, from the time the collection department will come into the picture to follow up the customer to get the payment as soon as possible, or else say however the due date we have within that, or else we may offer some discount. By following the discount also, this collection department may keep in touch with the customer, saying that if you pay early you will get discount. So anyway, like for collection, to collect the customer payments, okay, what are the activities we do as a part of organization, that kind of relevant information can be managed by collection workbench. Here there won't be any transactions and all, so simply just generating the reports and sending and maintaining the collectors information. That's it. Okay, so when you talk about here transaction workbench, when you talk about transaction process, see here, simple. As a supplier, when you talk about receivables, we have to treat ourselves as a suppliers. Let's take that example, that we will treat in that way. So as a supplier, what we'll do, we'll create the sales invoice. There I am calling as transaction, but actually like in payables we call as invoices, receivables all we call as transactions. The out of the transaction, one of the transaction is sales invoice or else sales transaction, or invoice transaction is nothing but sales transaction. Okay, so I'll create the sales invoice. Okay, the normal process. Whenever our sales department do some sales activity, based on that confirmation, we'll create the sales invoice. After that, what we'll do, the sales invoice will send to, please,
Collection department.
what receipt, what collection, what. First we'll create the sales invoice. Then what we have to do as a supplier, think and tell me, don't tell me, just I am asking some question. We'll create the sales invoice. We sold to some customer, we create sales invoice. Then what is the next step? Sorry, we have to send the invoice to customer. Otherwise, when we discussed about payables, how we got invoices? Supplier sent, that is the reason we got, right? That is the logic we have to understand, simple point. So we have to send to customer. Okay, we'll send to the customer. Then what customer will do? Tell me, like, why you are, is it secret or what? No, not secret points, right? What is there? Why you are not responding? So we'll send the invoice to the supplier. Then what supplier will do?
Make the payment.
Your statement is correct, but you have to send proper way. Then customer will make the payment by just looking at the due dates. Okay, customer will make the payment on due date or before or after also, whatever it may be. Okay, so then we will get the payment, right? Means we'll get the payment from customer, means we'll create the receipt. Okay, we got the 10,000 payment. Say you have a sales invoice also with the 10,000, you got a payment from the customer. So say you got check. The check information only will be creating in the system as a receipt. Then the receipt, what you have to do? You got payment, you create a receipt. Then what we have to do? You have to, yeah, you have to deposit in the bank. Okay, that will be doing. Before that, what we will do? We have to record in the system that receipt by specifying this payment we received against which customer, definitely which invoice. Yeah, correct, you are right. So when we get the payment, okay, when you get the payment from the customer, that will be recorded in the receipt. The receipt we have to apply on sales invoice. You have to apply. Otherwise, I received a payment, I'll record I received 20,000. Of course, I can mention so and so supply, so and so customer, but that is not enough, right? I have to specify why I received, for against which transaction, against which sales invoice I received. That we have to specify. That only we call as apply. The receipt will apply on sales invoice. If you are applying the receipt against the sales invoice, what is the meaning of that? If when you create the sales invoice, if the transaction amount is 10,000, it says it's a unpaid, outstanding invoice. When you get the receipt, we received, but still the invoice status would be unpaid. Whenever you apply, then system will update as a paid, and that invoice you can call as closed invoice. Normally outstanding. In payables also we discussed. Okay, unpaid invoices we call as open invoice or open transaction also called. Open transaction can be anything. But in receivables also, before customer make the payment, that is open. Okay, that is open receivables you can say. Okay, open receivables are open transaction. Once you make the payment, that will be closed. The balance are updated. That's how it works. Okay, this is a very traditional process, normal process in any company. Whenever there is some sale, will create the sales invoice, will be sent to the customer. Customer will make the payment based on due dates or before or after, depending on the case. And then that receipt will apply on the sales invoice. After applying the receipt on sales invoice, the receipt, the check will remit to bank. Will send the receipt to bank. Okay, that sending the receipt to bank we call as will remit. Remit is nothing but sending. Remit check, or call it as a receipt. Receipt or check, both we are treating as check information only. We are recording as a receipt, as a payment amount. You can use this any term. Okay, remit check to bank if it is check. Otherwise, simply general term is receipt only. Okay, receipt refers check. Normally here we are taking. Okay, remit receipt to bank. Once you remit the receipt to bank, that means check you are sending to the bank. Then what happens? Tell me, please.
Amount credited
Amount will hit it in our bank
account.
in your account.
Once you submit the check, that they'll take into the clearing process. Okay, they'll contact which bank issued and all. They'll look into those all these things. Once the check is cleared, the amount will get credited into our account. Based on that, we'll be updating in the system also, saying that the check got cleared, the receipt got cleared and all that. That's how we'll be recording. This is a very standard process, right? Any business, anywhere you see. So we'll have a sales invoice, we'll send to the customer will make the payment against which sales invoice will apply. Then to encash that check, we'll remit the check to bank, or say we'll remit the receipt to bank. Once that is clear, they will get amount. Say I send the check to the bank, check got bounced. That means here whatever the receipt I applied, that is wrong, right? I mean, I should not maintain. When I apply the receipt, system says this customer no need to pay, already paid. But you have experience, check got bounced. Immediately what we have to do? We have to reverse this application. That's all. Why we are applying without getting the payment? Because that is business, we should have trust on our customers. It's not like customer paid, I don't believe this customer, once check is cleared, then only I'll just take the action in the system. Means that may not be good practice. Otherwise, what happens is you receive the check, but still collection department may contact the customer. That is the reason just you have to update as you received, but you'll be putting the status as you received, not yet cleared. In that way, you can manage. Once it's get cleared, accordingly you'll be updating the status against the receipt as this against the check. The amount is credited to your account or cleared, that you can mention. Otherwise, you can reverse receipt anytime. Once you reverse, again the sales invoice will become open, yeah, outstanding. Okay, it will open because of application that got closed, and whenever you reverse the receipt, that will be open. Okay, this is the normal process which we see. Okay, so where we can understand through transaction workbench, we can create the sales invoices. With the receipt workbench, you can create receipts and you can apply the receipts on sales invoices. And as a receipt related activity, only one other activity you can say as a remittance we call. Okay, we'll perform the remittance to move the checks from our organization to bank. First we'll send the checks to the bank, or first we'll be recording in the system. Okay, we never do that like that. Okay, first we'll do the physical activity, real. Once business takes place, then only we'll record in the system. Remember that point all the time in any case. Okay, 99%, there could be some exceptional cases. Okay, first the activity will take place outside of the system. That will be recording what happened. You are recording in the system. Always remember what's going to happen. You cannot do that. You are going to print the check printing you will do in the system. That will be given to the supplier normally when you are making the payment. But almost all other cases we will have work in this way. First that happens in the business, that we will be recording in the system. So I received 10 checks. What I'll do, immediately I'll create the 10 receipts. First I created receipts, I received the checks. Because I received first, then I am creating. Now what I'll do is, I'll call my accountant. I'll give to my accountant these 10 checks, go and deposit in the bank. Whatever I given to my accountant to deposit in the bank, that only I'll write in the system saying that 10 checks are remitted to bank. Okay, don't think anytime, any point. First we'll do in system and later. No. Okay, first we'll do it happens in the business, then that comes to the system as a record. That's it. Don't yes, we know very well, but don't think and understand we are doing the business through system. We are not doing any business through system. System we are using to record the business related data. What we are doing already did. That is the point. Okay, almost 99% everything comes to the system after doing the real business activity. Okay, that's it. Okay, this is the normal standard process. Okay, now we discussed about transaction workbench. It's we can create and maintain the transactions. The receipt workbench, you can create and maintain the receipts. Now collection workbench, here collection related activities we can perform, maintaining the collectors, maintaining some statements, sending some letters to the customers. Okay, this sort of information you can manage by using the collection workbench. And we have other workbench called as bills receivables. Do you know the concept of bills? Maybe if you are from commerce background in the 10+2, definitely you should come across, or else in BCom or MCom. Anyone tell me what is the concept of bills? What is the meaning of bills? Bills. Explain me the concept. What is how it works? If you say check, how check process works? What do you explain? We'll give checks to somebody. The check, the stationery, the check should be given by which we have to receive from the banker. Okay, whatever we got from the banker, that check will write and will give to somebody. Somebody can go and deposit it to their account, or else directly by submitting they can encash it. That is the process of the check, right? Or else they may submit for clearing and all, clearance process and all. That's how it works. The same way bills, how bills concept works. Forget about our application. Talk about normal, or else what you learned long back. Anyone? What is the process of bills? How it works? How it works? At least see, at least it's 99% to 99% know that. Please, tell me. Somebody say.
When we purchase vendors
Are you sure? First, my question. Do you know? A generic only I am asking. Yes, if you know generic, you know real. Then tell me.
when we purchased some items,
Anything. No need to give example. Simply when you do some purchases, okay.
he acknowledged accept the cash. He will provide some document.
Who will provide to whom and who will do that?
Vendor is provided to customer.
Vendor will provide the customer. Okay. Fine. Fine. Okay. Okay. No need to spend time on this to understand. It's a simple concept. See, if you take this example, take same example. We sold to some customer for 10,000. Normal case, what happens is we'll create the invoice and we'll send to the customer. When you talk about the bills, also what happens is, so we did some sale for 10,000 rupees. We'll create the what we'll create. Not why bills. When you do the sales, what you do? Please stand on that points. Sales invoice. So okay, create the sales invoice. This I have to send to whom, supplier or customer? Customer. Will send to the customer. In normal scenarios, what happens? This is a standard process we discussed, right? We created a sales invoice and we sent to the customer. Okay. Then next, what happens in normal process? Customer will send the check, say payment. I'll say check. Okay, let's take simple example check for better understanding. Okay, the customer will send the check. But when you talk about bills concept, customer is not going to send the check. Customer is not going to send the check. Customer will be sending the bill. More or less bill is equal to check, but how it is different we'll discuss now. Okay, in case of normal process, customer will make the payment to us through check or some other method, any method. We are taking one of the payment method as check, but it can be anything. General cases it happens through check. Nowadays it's all about electronic payments and all, we know, right? So say take simple example, customer given the check. Now what you will do? You will create the receipt. Now in the current, if you go with a bills receivables concept, okay, I'll explain you. You'll come to know complete understanding what exactly. If you are treating the bills and all bills receivables concept, what customer will do? Instead of giving the check, customer will be giving the bill. Now what you have to do? You will create the bill in the system. Okay, you will create the bill in the system. Okay, when you get the check from the customer, you are creating the receipt and you are applying on the sales invoice, right? What is your confidence you are creating the receipt and applying on the sales invoice? What is your confidence or what is your trust? First trust is your customer, and other important trust is the stationery. The check is not generated by him, by bank. Some authorization will be there. Okay, that is the trust we will be having. Okay, otherwise if you're writing some white paper and nobody will create the receipt based on that, right? Maybe you are a good customer, but you don't accept it. That has to be in the proper process. So in the same way, when you get a check from the customer, you are recording the receipt. You are creating the receipt, you are applying also, but you are not getting the check now. In case of bills receivables, what happens? You will be getting the bill. How you will be getting the bill? When you are going to get bill from your customer, think for the bill there will be some authorization from the banker also. The customer, your customer will speak to the banker saying that I am going to give the bill to my supplier. I'm going to give the bill to my supplier, and if my customer, my supplier is going to contact you by showing this bill, please make the payment. I am here to pay you. Okay, fine. So that kind of communication will be there. That kind of process it works. Okay. So before when our customer is going to bill to us, that should be authorized, right? So they'll have a just communication process, the banker. So then we'll get the bill from the customer. Now what we have to do is we have to record in the system as bill is received against which sales invoice. That's very important. Now bill will apply
On sales.
to sales invoice. Okay. If you get check, you will create the receipt, you will apply on the sales invoice. If you get the bill, you will create the bill, and the bill you will apply on the sales invoice. In case of check, what you will do? We'll remit the receipt to, we'll remit the check to bank. But here the term will be changed. We don't call as we'll remit and all. In case of bill, we call as we will discount the bill. Discounting in the sense submitting the bill and taking the payment. Okay. So here in case of check, say for example, customer given the check by giving the date as 16th. Today is 15th, 16th. Now today if you go and deposit in the bank, you don't get amount, right? That is valid from the date whatever mentioned from that. Again, of course, for every check there will be some lifetime, like 3 months or 6 months. Okay, the time will be there. That let it be. But we got a check with the date of 16. Okay, or else we may get future dated payments also, already discussed in payables. In the same way, customer can give us future dated payments. So on maturity date only, you can encash that check. Okay, now I received check, I can go and submit in the bank. Now when I am giving the bills, my customer can give the bill by putting some future date. Customer can give with a future date. Customer given the bill with a month, date of 20 something like 25th. Okay, 26th. I got a bill. Take simple example. I got a check in one case from one supplier with a 26th, and from another customer I got with a bill. I got bill with 26th. From one customer check with 26, and another customer bill with 26. If I get check from the customer, I have to wait till 26th. Till 26th I have to wait to encash the check. But if I get the bill, I no need to wait. Even the date is mentioned 26th, I can go and speak my banker saying that I have one bill my customer submitted. Based on this bill, the bill is just the date is mentioned in that 26th, but I need money today. When banker will see that bill, they know who issued and everything. There will be proof like who issued and all the information. By seeing that, they'll say, okay, if you need today also, we'll give you the payment, because it's a guaranteed. Like I can get, by showing this bill, I can get the payment from the respective authorized organization and all. So I mean to say bank, other bank. So in that case, banker can say yes, today also we'll give you the payment. But only the point is, if you need today only, we'll charge some amount. Say amount is 10,000. If you want to discount the bill today, I'll give you 9,500. Is it okay? The reason why they are charging that much, they have to wait to get the payment till 26th. But if you go on to show the check, take 1,000, nobody will give, right? 10,000 check I have, which is future dated. Okay, please take and give me, means they won't give one single rupee or single dollar also. But in case of bill, this is how it works. I got a bill from my supplier with my name. That bill, that check I cannot give to my suppliers. Can I give that check to my suppliers? No. In case of bill, that is possible. In case of bill, I got a bill from my customer. That bill I can give it to anyone. Yes, generally we'll give to supplier also, to anyone. That means the bill will have a just provisioning kind of privileges. Whoever go and submit that bill, they can get the payment from that. That flexibility the bill will be having. Okay, so here what happens, we'll create the bill and we'll apply on the sales invoice, and then the bill will be submitting in the bank to discount it. Once we discount, Then from that bill, if you get the payment, then you will create the receipt. Then you will create the receipt, and the receipt you will apply on what? Think and tell me. Bill, enough. Already bill is applied on the sales invoice, right? That means receipt you are applying on the bill means already bill is applied on the sales invoice. Indirectly you are applying the receipt on sales invoice. This is how it works. Okay. Normal process, receipt will create, apply the sales invoice. In between receipt application and the sales invoice, there will be bill will come into the picture, intermediate step. You have to create the bill you have to apply on the sales invoice. Finally receipt you will apply on the bill once it is cleared. But here, before you getting the payment only, you are creating the receipt. Once you get encash that check and all, you are changing the status for receipt as you got the money. But here it's not like changing, it's a separate document also will be creating, and that's how we'll be managing the bills receivables. Okay, that's the concept of bills receivables. When we get the bills from the customers and all, it happens. Generally nowadays you don't see this kind of practices. Okay, so but this is a process. We'll create sales invoice, like we may process wise we'll be sending. Whenever customer will give the bill, that will record the bill will apply on the sales invoice. Okay, then against the bill, once we get the payment, we'll create the receipt and we'll apply receipt on bill, because bill already applied on the sales invoice. That means this will automatically get applicable for sales invoice. Okay, this is how it works. This is all about bills receivable concept. Clear, right? To handle this, now that means this create receipt, create bill, right? The create bill activity you can do from bills receivables primarily. Okay, that's it.
In case of bills discounted with bank, the bank pays you the only 9,500 out of 10,000. And at the time of the entering into our books,
yeah, you can record this. See, if you have some charges, bank charges and all, you can capture it. You can capture that information. Okay, so fine, that's how you can manage. This is what we have to understand from receivables. We have 4 workbenches. Okay, clear, right? 4 workbenches. Now out of 4, these 2 are primarily general. Collections, there is nothing much. Bills receivables, so rarely you may see nowadays the company is using ERP. Still they don't go with that downgraded great approach and all. So now even checks also you don't find in many companies. All are electronic, online electronic process on EFT processes. So anyway, we'll see that. So now first we'll go with the invoice workbench. Okay, we'll take this invoice workbench and we'll see what are the different transactions we have in receivables. We know in payables what are the different invoices we have. In the same way, in receivables, as a part of transaction workbench, what are the different transactions we can process, we'll discuss. The first point is payables we call as invoice types. Here we call as transaction types. Here also you can call as invoice types only, but terms generally we use as a transaction. Means as a supplier, whatever we do with our customers, generally we treat as a transaction we are doing, some business transaction. Being a supplier, generally we call I received invoice, right? The term is more relevant. Okay, when you are acting as a customer, we will get some invoice from the supplier. That is more the term we are using as invoice from payable side. But when you are standing at receivable side, generally we should treat as we are doing the business. We are the initiators, right? Initiators to do the sales and all. That is the reason. Simply each and every business activity which you do in the system will generally treat as a transaction. Okay, which will deal with the customers and all. The relevant transaction we call as transaction. Relevant activities we call as transaction. Okay, let's see what are the different transactions we have in receivables. What are the different transactions we have in receivables? Just make a note. We have a transaction called as invoice transaction. Okay, debit memo transaction. And credit memo transaction. And chargeback transaction. Deposit transaction. Guarantee transaction. Bills receivables transaction. Sorry. Okay. Okay, invoice transaction, debit memo transaction, credit memo, chargeback, deposit, guarantee, and bills receivable transactions. These are the different transactions we have in receivables. Okay, fine. So we'll see one by one what is the purpose, how it works in the business process. So invoice transaction. In general way, this only we are calling as sales invoice. Okay, or you can call as customer invoice also. You say invoice transaction nothing but sales invoice, or call it as customer invoice. The reason this invoice we are creating to send to the customer. In payables, what are the invoice we have? Standard invoice that you can call as call as supplier invoice, because we are getting that invoice from supplier. That's what we call as supplier invoice. Otherwise, normally just we call as invoice. Since we are getting that invoice because we are purchasing, you can call as a purchasing invoice also. Normally, you can call as standard invoice, generic name what you can see in the system, or else you can call as purchase invoice or supplier invoice. This is payables I am talking about. Okay, fine. The receivables invoice transaction generally it's nothing but sales invoice or customer invoice. Okay. What does it mean by sales invoice or customer invoice? It's very simple. Okay. Whatever the invoice we are recording against the sale, that we call as sales invoice. That's it. Take the point. Okay. Sales invoice means against the sales, whatever the invoice we record, that we call as sales invoice or customer invoice or else invoice transaction. Anything. Against the sales, the invoice whatever, the transaction whatever we record, that we call as invoice transaction. I'll say against the sales we'll record the invoice transaction. That means when you do the sales, when you perform the sales activity, to record that information, to whom you are selling, what you are selling, when they have to pay, and all the information will be recording. That only we call as invoice transaction of sales or customer invoice. So the simple definition we can take: against the sales we record the invoice transaction. Else based on sales activity, okay, we record sales invoice or invoice transaction. Or else when you perform the sales activity, the activity related sales activity related information we can record in the system as sales invoice for the information to follow up and to get the payment from customer. That's it. Simple point you can take against the sales what are the invoice we create, that we call as invoice transaction, or else what are the transaction we create, that we call as invoice transaction. That, fine. I'll take simple example. Say we created one invoice transaction with 5,000 or 50,000. Okay. Just we sold to some customer. Okay, we sold some goods to one customer. The worth is 50,000. We created one sales invoice transaction. Now what I have to do is I want to reduce by mistake I entered 50,000. So actually just I added one more zero by mistake. Only it should be say 5,000. Take that simple example. So do we have some control not to create wrong amounts and all? Yes, we have control. That also we have. But for our understanding, I'm just taking this point. Okay. So instead of 5,000, I create invoice with 50,000. Now what I want to do is I want to reduce 45,000. So to reduce amount from this invoice means I created by mistake. This is one example. Another example I'll take. We sold to the customer and for 50,000, and customer did some return. That nothing but which returns those are? Sales returns. Okay. We sold for 50,000, customer returned for 20,000 material. In that case, in our system, still we have to show customer has to pay 50,000. No, we have to show in the system customer is liable to us only 30. So we have to reduce 20,000. Okay. So another case I'll take. We give the invoice. We saw customer purchase for 50,000. We give the invoice, but after the sale, we are interested to give some discount to customer. So just we called and informed to customer, you have to pay 50,000. Generally, I set some target to reach and all. I reached. I am very happy with the sales. So you are also one of the customer within the sales. What in my targeted sales. So I am going to give 5,000 discount. Okay. Then what customer will do? In their system, think the customer also using Oracle apps. Can be any apps. Doesn't matter. Think Oracle apps only using. What the customer will do then? Think and tell me. Don't tell me something else. You should know by this time. Otherwise, there is no time to know. We are using Oracle apps. Customer also using Oracle apps. I called and informed to my customer saying that, boss, just take 5,000 discount. Sorry? Why? Simple. See, apply discount no. Apply discount no. They'll create the credit memo we discussed. To reduce the invoice amount in payables. To reduce the invoice amount because of other than purchase returns, we'll use the credit memo. That means customer will create the credit memo in their system. Okay, but in receivables, case can be anything. It can be sales returns or price corrections. You enter invoice transaction with wrong amounts. You want to correct it, or else maybe we are giving some discount to customer. When you give discount in their books, they will be correcting. From our books also we have to update, right? So we should say customer has to pay only 45,000. So this is how we have to update. With any reason in receivables, with any reason, if you want to reduce the transaction amount or customer outstanding balances, if you want to reduce the transaction amount with any reason, we use credit memo. Don't say it's in the sequence and you are saying credit memo, debit memo. Credit memo. Just make a note. To reduce the customer balances with any reason, we use credit memo. We'll say to correct the customer balances. You can. So else the correct means it's positive, negative 2 points will come into picture. Say to reduce the customer balances with any reason, we can use the credit memo. Reason can be anything. It can be sales returns, or you entered by mistake wrong amount, or you given some discount after sale. At the time of sale means with that amount only will create the transaction. After sale you are giving the discount means you have to reduce that amount. Okay. To reduce the customer balances with any reason, we use credit memo. That means credit memo is which sign? Negative sign. Payables? Negative only. Payables and receivables negative. And what is use of debit memo in the payables?
Decrease the liability of purchase return.
Yeah, when we have a purchase returns, so that case if you want to record in the system to reduce the balances, then we use the debit memo. Okay. So, but when I talk about receivables also we have debit and credit memo, but debit memo purpose is totally different. I'll take simple example. I have an invoice. Okay, I have an invoice, and when I have some invoice, I created an invoice. After creating invoice, I realized that this amount should be 55,000. Okay, this amount should be
55,000.
In that case, what I can do is, we can go and change it. I create a transaction. I want to update the amount. I can go on to update it. I can make 50 to 55. Okay. But there will be cases. So I create a transaction 50,000. Say customer paid 10,000. Let's take simple example. Like any amount you can take, but let me take this simple example. Customer paid 10,000. Now what you will do? You will create the receipt. You will create the receipt for 10,000. this receipt will apply, right?
Apply.
Apply. Then if you go to this transaction, what would be the outstanding?
40,000.
40. What action we did? Receipt we applied. Once you apply the receipt on any transaction, you cannot update the amount. After this situation, I realized transaction amount should be
45,000.
55,000. See, I created a transaction with a 50, I applied receipt with 10. And later I realized that the original transaction amount should be 55. Now, if I go and try to update, system won't accept. It will accept before you apply full or partial receipt, anything, before you apply the receipt. This is one example. Other example, I'll say I created a transaction with the 50,000. Later I realized it should be 45 only. Then what I'll do? Tell me what I'll do. Tell me why you are not taking initiative to answer.
Create credit memo.
Case I am giving for 50,000 transaction I have. Okay, I realize that that amount should be
45,000.
45. Then what I have to do?
Create
Debit or credit memo? Debit or credit?
credit
Credit only, because for any reason if you want to reduce, credit memo. So I'll create the
memo.
credit memo with minus. Now the transaction amount will become
45,000.
45 only. Now again I am realizing, always I'll be realizing. Okay, again I realize that okay, I did mistake. Actually that should be 50 only. There is some other note I forgot. Now what I have to do? This 45, actually it would be 45, right? Once you create, it will be 45. Now I found that, so whatever I did wrong, it should be 50 only. Now because I applied a credit memo. I applied credit memo on the original transaction. If you apply credit memo also, you cannot go and update the amounts. Now if I want to add amount, okay, I cannot do it. I don't know debit memo or credit memo. I'm not talking about it. So now the situation is two cases I am taking. I have one transaction. I applied receipt. I cannot modify the amounts. Another case I am taking. I have one transaction. I created one credit memo on the transaction. After creating the credit memo, I cannot update it. But before applying the receipt or credit memo, I can go and update the amounts. I can correct it. But if you have a transaction, if you do some activities called credit memo application or receipt application, the transaction amounts cannot be updated. But still, if you have a requirement, so take this case only applied. Now I want to make it 50. So that means what is my requirement? I want to add some amount to existing transaction. If you want to add some amount to existing transaction, there is no way directly where you can go and change. Only the option is debit memo. By using the debit memo transaction, we can add the amount to existing transaction. By using the debit memo transaction, we can add the amount to existing transaction. By using the debit memo transaction, we can add the amount to existing transaction. So debit memo is equal to invoice transaction only. Okay, but as an alternative transaction, just for identification, this is adjustment. As adjustment, we are adding the amount and all. We are just going to mention with the debit memo. Debit memo is equal to invoice, but when you do the sale, we'll be recording the sale with invoice transaction, not with the debit memo. If any amount you want to add, okay, we can use the debit memo transaction. When we are creating the debit memo, what we'll do is the 5,000 whatever I'm entering, this 5,000 we should refer which invoice. The invoice number I'll be giving. This invoice number I'll be entering in the debit memo just for reference. The reality how it happens, really balance will get updated or not, everything we'll see in the system. I'll explain you when we are doing it. For now, the purpose try to understand. Okay. So against the sales, we'll create the invoice transaction. If you want to reduce the amount from the sales invoice for with any reason, use credit memo. And if you want to add some amount to existing invoice, yes, you can add it. No. Listen. If you want to add some amount to existing invoice, you can add it. But if you apply the credit memo or if you apply the receipt, you cannot update it. So that is the reason In that scenario, we can use the debit memo, okay, to add amount to existing invoice by providing that invoice number as a reference within the debit memo. Okay, that is simple points to understand. That clear, right? Any question, please? Okay, next concept is chargeback. I'll take the same example. Okay, I'll take the same example. Customer has to pay 45,000. Okay, I have one customer. I created one sales invoice with the 45,000. Say customer has this invoice I created last month. Today is due date. Today is due date. Just customer came to us and customer is asking, I cannot pay 45,000. I have only 20,000. Remaining I'll pay after 1 month. Then generally what we say? Okay or no? What is there in that? Okay or no? Right? Say, yeah, okay. In that case, okay. We may say okay, but customer is very critical customer. Customer is saying, I'll pay after 1 month. Now I'll pay. I have to pay everything today, but I'll pay 20. Remaining 25 I'll pay next month. Due date is when? Today. If customer is going to pay after 1 month, how much late? 1 month late. But customer says, you please treat my due date is after 1 month. Otherwise, that is the reason. You treat I have to pay remaining 25 after 1 month. Don't treat I have to pay today and I'll be paying after 1 month. In that case, there will be charges. So that's how customers can request us. So in that case, what we have to do is take that simple example. Customer has to pay 45. Customer paid 20. Now what we'll do? We'll create receipt. Receipt with 20,000 and we'll apply. Once you apply, what happens here? The 20,000 will be reduced from this, right? Outstanding is 25. Generally, in the transaction, what are the amount is unpaid that we call as outstanding. Technically, the term simply we call as system point of view open item. Remember the terms. Use the same terms when you speak. Okay, we call as open item. The amount which is unpaid that we call as open item. In the same way, don't call whatever the paid item, closed item. We don't use as a closed item. Whatever unpaid amount we call as open item. Now, in this scenario, customer has to pay 45, customer paid 20, the 20 will get reduced once you apply. What is the open item? 25. As per this invoice, what is the due date? Today. We applied the payment term, due date will be calculated. Now say customer is asking to pay in the next month. Okay, just customer is going to pay in the next month by following the same due date as a late, okay. But customer is asking for new due date. That means customer is requesting us to postpone the due date for the remaining amount. Okay, if you want to postpone the due date for an invoice, what we have to do is, whatever the amount you have in this transaction, 25,000 outstanding. But for this invoice, there will be separate payment term which says due date is today. But customer request is next due date. If you want to give the new due date, you have to create the separate transaction. The transaction you have to create with how much amount? 25,000. Here you can give the new due date. Here you can give the new due date. So this is a requirement, right? This is a case, and customer is asking to give the new due date with the for remaining open item. So in this case, what you can do is, that means we have to create the new transaction with a new due date. Okay, so from this transaction with the open item, what we can do is, first we have to close it. If I am going to create here 25,000 as per this transaction 25, as per this transaction 25, it will become total 50 customer has to pay. The reality 25. So before you go on to create this transaction, what you have to do? You have to close it. You have to close this open item. How much open item we are closing? With the same amount we will create the new transaction. When you create the transaction, okay, when you create the transaction, generally we can call it as we are billing to the customer. That's the meaning, right? The invoice is nothing but bill. Supplier point of view, we are billing to the customer, right? So we are billing. So other words, I can say we are charging. Okay, with the bill, what we'll do, we'll charge the customer. That means when you create invoice transaction, we are billing, or you can say we are charging. How many times you charge? Once only, right? For one transaction, we will be charging once. But here, if you look at this scenario, you charge here, and again for open item, since customer is requesting for new due date, again you are going to charge. You are going to charge once again. We are going to charge back. We are going to charge back. We are going to charge once again. That means, okay, we are going to do once again that. Okay, that means, so for remaining amount, 25,000 will close in this transaction with the same amount. Whatever the transaction you create, that we call as chargeback transaction. Okay, simple case. If customer is requesting us to postpone the due date, by postponing the due date, whatever the transaction we create, that only we call as chargeback transaction. The original transaction we charged, again we are going to charge back to the customer with some remaining open item. That's the reason we call as chargeback transaction. When you do this kind of activity, I create a transaction, I apply receipt. After that, against this invoice, if I perform the chargeback activity, or I mean, I'll provide the new due date and all, then automatically system will create the chargeback transaction. Okay, that is an example to understand, but as a statement, you can take the point as, okay, by postponing the due date, okay, by postponing the due date for open item, okay, or I'll say to postpone the due date, okay, to postpone the due date, we can create the chargeback transaction. Just take a simple definition, but you know the concept, you got the point, right? That means if there is any open item, okay, open item in any existing transaction, if you want to postpone the due date for that same, you will create the chargeback transaction. Okay, simple point is to postpone the due date for existing transaction, we can create the chargeback transaction. When you say to postpone the due date for existing transaction, again the point is within the existing transaction for open item only. To create the chargeback transaction only for open item, not for complete transaction. Okay. By postponing the due date, or else to postpone the due date for existing transaction, or else open transaction for open item. Okay. To postpone the due date for open item, we can create the chargeback transaction. That's it. This is what we have to understand about chargeback. Chargeback transaction will be created by system automatically whenever you perform the relevant activity on the invoice. That's it. Okay. To postpone the due date for remaining open item, we can create the chargeback. Clear, right? That's all about chargeback. When being a customer, being a supplier, when you perform the chargeback, our customer, what he will do? Sorry? Another invoice. Okay, yeah. Yeah, another invoice you can receive, but normally what happens is that customer in their books, they can update the due date. Payables, simply you can go and update the due date, right? That's how you can just update that information. That is also possible. Fine, done. That's all about chargeback transaction. Now deposit. Being a customer, will give advance to the, please respond immediately. What is there? Supplier. Being a customer, will give advance to supplier. Being a customer, whatever the advance we are giving to our supplier will record in our books as deposit, right? Who are deposits here? Why you are thinking here? Just concept I am asking. You are watching something, you are using the terms. What is my point? Already we completed. That's the reason I am asking. I am expecting the same terms. Being a customer, if you give some advance to our supplier, that will record in our books as prepayment. Okay, in Excel it is deposit, means it should be deposit. Huh? Chargeback as some deposit. No, right? Okay, being a customer, if you give some advance to supplier, that will record in our books as a prepayment. That we have seen already in the payables. Once that advance received by supplier will record that advance in their books as a deposit. That means here, what is the deposit? The customer advance we will record in the system as a deposit transaction. Okay. What are the advance we receive from the customer? That advance information we can record in the system by using deposit transaction. Customer advances we can record the system by using deposit transaction. Don't call it as prepayments will receive. Okay, prepayments will record in the receivables as a deposit transfer. Is it correct or wrong? Correct only, term wrong. The prepayment that generally should be used by who are paying, right? That is also correct, but you don't use that kind of terms here. Say what are the advance we receive from the customers. That advance we can record in the receivables by using deposit transaction. That's it. Clear, right? Done. Okay. The customer advances we can record in receivables by using the deposit transaction. Another transaction type is guarantee transaction. Other transaction type is guarantee transaction. Let's talk about it. So being a customer, I am a customer, I have a supplier. I want to promise to my supplier. I want to promise to my supplier in terms of business point of view, or business or personal or professional, whatever it may be. Why generally we promise? Huh? To pay, na? Something else is there, right? Why we generally promise? Nobody is giving the right answer, but everybody knows it. Why generally we promise? Yeah, correct. Everything is correct.
To maintain some relationship.
To get benefit.
To guarantee the.
No, to get benefit. Simple point. No benefit, no. Who will promise for what they will promise? Nothing. To get benefit only we promise. Now, customer will promise to supplier means to get a benefit. Okay. Customer is going to promise to the supplier. What customer can promise to the supplier? Customer can promise, take simple example. I'll purchase from you this much volume of the goods in this month. Okay. Why is promising? Trust not. If you say just trust, I don't agree.
To get the benefit.
To what benefit? Discount. I'll purchase from you this month for sure 20 lakhs worth of the material. What do you say? That means how much discount will go? What is the benefit? Says okay, I'll give you that straight away 5% discount. Okay, that's how some benefit. So take simple example. As a customer, I am promising to my supplier, I'll purchase from you this month for 10 lakhs. Then, who can remember, who can forget this promise? Tell me.
Customer will remember, supplier will forget.
Oh no, that's a risk. Supplier should remember, customer may forget. It's not important for me. Already I have taking the benefit of discount. I may forget. Okay, but supplier has to remember because he will lose. Otherwise, he will get some loss and all. Say I promise 10 lakhs. Okay, I purchased just 1 lakh. I got 5% discount. Why 5% discount policy is applicable? Because I am going to buy 10 lakhs. I purchased for 1 lakh and I stopped. If supplier is forgetting, everybody will be promising like that only to that supplier, right? So he has to make a note. If I am going to buy, I should get a call from the supplier. What nonsense, you promised 10 lakhs. I see only 1 lakh. The second month already, right? So for that follow up or to have a just information or contacting and all, supplier should remember. Being a customer, we should not forget, but we may forget because we love it. These kind of things, right? So that is reason. So supplier should remember. If customer is promising, supplier for sure they have to record. They have to make a note. But supplier can forget it. Customer can forget about it. So if you are going to promise to your supplier, do you have something in your payables to record? No. That is the reason. It may not be very much important. Of course, as a function, Oracle also not giving. Don't think that is the reason Oracle is not giving. That is not there in payables. But when being a supplier, when we are taking some promises from some customers, so it's a mandatory we should record. Right? So for that reason, the customer promises we can record in the receivables by using guarantee transaction. What is the guarantee? The guarantee means in terms of business guarantee, how much they are going to buy. The promises what customer is doing, for how much amount they are promising. They'll be telling some amount. I'll be buying for 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs, whatever. The customer promises we can record by using the guarantee transaction. Just make a note. Okay, customer promises we can record in receivables by using the guarantee transaction. Okay, customer promises we can record in receivables using guarantee transaction. Okay, customer promises we can record in receivables by using the guarantee transaction. Done. Bills receivables already we discussed. Okay, normally we'll create the invoice. When we get the bill from the customer, we'll record the bills receivable transaction. I just discussed as a bill will record, right? Nothing but bills receivables transaction. This bills receivable transaction will apply on sales invoice. When you get the receipt, we'll create receipt and we'll apply receipt on bills receivable transaction. Sales not. That's what just now we discussed. This is the point. Bill is nothing but bills receivable transaction only. That will be applying that receipt on bills receivable transaction. That is the process. Anyway, we discussed. That's it. No need to understand anything. Clear, right? These transactions. So primarily these are the transactions which we'll be handling, and we have some copy transaction that is separate function. I'll discuss that one comes into the type of transactions receivables. Okay. And another point, when you are going to create any transaction, what would be the structure for transaction? We'll see. We know like what is the structure for invoice and payables, right? What is the structure? Header, lines, distribution. No change here. Also same. We'll have a transaction header. And transaction lines. And distributions. This you may call as transaction line distributions, or transaction distributions also you call. Both levels we have. Simple, you can take in that way. Header, lines and distributions. Same as invoice structure. Okay, what information we require to record any transaction? Let's take the simple example as invoice transaction. To record invoice transaction, what information we require? What information we require? System point of view we'll discuss later, but generic point. Okay, what information we require? Who is the customer? And the customer address? And sorry? Yeah, the transaction date.
Mode of payment.
Okay, payment terms, right? For which items you are selling, and what is the amount, say price or whatever amount. Okay, what else? Okay, payment method and all, it's not mandatory like payables to select here. It's not mandatory. When you are making the payment, you can choose the method. When you record the receipts, how you got the payment, that you can record. But in payables, we are making payment, we know very well. In case of this, our customer is paying, yes, more or less will be knowing, but may not be sure all the time. That is the reason it's not mandatory at the transaction creation. Okay, primarily this is the information we'll be providing: customer address, transaction date, and the payment terms, which item, which amount. Again, that amount is belongs to which accounts, nothing but distribution. Here we don't have any distribution set for transaction creation. We have distribution set concept in receivables, not for the transaction creation. That is for some different purpose. So for miscellaneous revenue purpose, you can use the distribution set in receivables, not for the transaction. So this is the information we'll be providing. It's a very basic. When we are just working on it, you can see some more information. But anyway, we are going to talk about few more points on this. Okay, when you are creating the transaction, this is a very basic information: customer, address, and the transaction date, and the payment terms, which item or services we are providing it to the customer, and what is the amount of the transaction, and what the amount is belongs to which accounts the distribution will be entering. Okay, fine. Now let's talk about customer. We discussed about supplier and payables, right? So supplier information is global or local?
Global.
What do you mean by global? Any one person, please tell me. Any one. What do you mean by global, please? One, anyone. Please.
All the business groups will have the
I didn't say business groups and all. Something else. We have anyone?
all the operating units will have the information about the supplier.
All the business groups will have information means maybe correct but not exact. Yeah. Anyone? What do you mean by supplier is global? Supplier information is global.
We can assign the supplier information to different operating units.
Gone over. Anyone?
We can access supplier information globally. Any other
Means?
countries.
Means?
All over
The statement is correct. See, when you say supplier information global, it is not specific to any operating unit or anything. It's global in the sense the supplier information is available instance level. Within the instance that will be available, you will create the supplier outside of the operating unit. That supplier information can be used by any operating unit. Can be used by any operating unit if you have site for that operating unit against the same supplier. Now one supplier, ABC supplier. The supplier is there in the system. If you want to use that supplier in any one of the site, any one of the operating unit, for that supplier, whatever the site you have, the site you have to assign to operating. One site you can assign to only one operating unit. Wrong statement. Some people answered also. Okay, n number of operating units. See, that's what I am telling. Just okay, fine. One site you can assign. Okay, but when you talk about supplier, it's a global. Okay, if you create supplier, that supplier is available everywhere from any entity or anywhere. But when you talk about site also we are creating outside of the operating unit. Okay, one supplier site can be assigned to multiple operating unit. But the same way, same example is applicable for customer. Customer information is global information. If you create one customer, the customer can be used by any operating unit or any multi-org, entire system. Within the system, go for any multi-org definition, the customer will be available. Customer information is global, master data. In other words, we call as customer is master record. Customer data we call as master data. Okay, supplier data is master, global. In other words, you can say master data. Supplier header. In the same way, customer information also global or master data. Supplier site information specific to operating unit when you assign only. Otherwise, you are creating the supplier site outside of the operating unit, then that site can be assigned to one or multiple operating units. Right? Clear, right? That means one site can be assigned to how many? Multiple. But when you talk about customer address, the address is nothing but site only here. Customer site. Normally we call it as address, it's nothing but site only. Okay, the customer site is specific to operating unit. Make a note. It's not like a supplier site. Supplier site, one site you can assign to multiple OUs, but customer site is specific to one OU. That means site you will be creating, okay, for specific OU. Customer site is specific to OU. Okay, clear, right? Another point.
If you want this customer to another role, you have to create another.
That's it. Okay. Sorry. In payables, supplier side we have. The site got what are the different purposes?
Payments and purchases.
Please tell me. What are the different purposes we have for supplier side in payables?
For purchasing payment requisition.
Requisition.
Yes. Requisition only, or purchasing, or payment, or say pay site, whatever. So every site got some purpose. Why? Why? To communicate accordingly, right? So with which site you are going to communicate? In which site you have to communicate with the supplier for PO. So that will be addressing accordingly. PO process only that will be available. Even that is for general how you are contacting. In the same way, now customer point of view, being a supplier, what you should know, which addresses you should know. Tell me. Any guess?
Shipping address.
Shipping address. Definitely you should know. If you are selling to the customer, customer should give you where you have to ship. That means you should know for which customer what is the shipping address. One customer can have multiple shipping addresses, right? Yes, done. Then billing address. That's it. These two are very important. That's all. So when you are creating the customer, ship to location and bill to locations also we have to create. There could be n number of many other locations, but primarily when you are dealing with any customer, ship to and bill to are mandatory. When you are creating the address or site, there will be specifying that address is for what purpose. So like payables, however we set purpose. The same way the receivables also will be setting address for
Bill to or ship to.
ship to or bill to. Okay, so that accordingly to the respective address only you can ship the material, or else you will be sending the invoice. Okay, we have to create the ship to and bill to as a primary, and bill to is mandatory, ship to is not mandatory. What could be the reason? Any guess? My point is, bill to is mandatory, ship to may not be mandatory.
Customer can take directly the goods.
Any guess?
Location and
Yeah, that is the point. In case of services, you are providing the services. That case, services can you send? No, right? Services you can give, right? So that is the reason the bill to, ship to may not be mandatory all the cases, but bill to should be mandatory. Otherwise, supplier won't be there, right? So bill to should be there. Okay. So otherwise, there is no interest for the suppliers to do the business. That's it. That is a point you have to understand. Okay. Customer information is global. Say master data. It's not specific to any operating unit. If you create customer, that means you are creating outside of the operating unit. That data can be accessed by any operating unit. Okay. But any operating unit you want to use that customer with their operating unit, there should be site. Okay. As per supplier, one supplier site can be assigned to multiple OUs because the supplier site will create outside of the operating unit. But in the case of receivables, customer or site or customer address will create within the operating unit. So one site for only one operating. That's it. This is the point you have to understand. The transaction date normally on which date you are recording the transaction. Payment terms, you know what is the purpose? What is the purpose of payment terms? To calculate the due date and discount. Same point you have to remember, even receivables also. So payables we are calculating the due date and all. Who given that discount? Supplier given. Who are giving there? Even they have to calculate and maintain, right? So that's it. And items, which items? Items are services what we are providing to the supplier, customer, that we have to capture as a part of transaction. We'll see in the system how we are able to access items in receivables which are there in the inventory. That point we will be discussing detail level. And what is the amount for the transaction, or the transaction amount, and the amount is belongs to which account. All these details we'll see. Almost all this information. Okay, so except this items distribution will be available in the header level also. Okay, take simple point. Except item, all the information will be filling in the header level only. Okay, items level, what is the item, which item and all will be mentioning. There also you can have distribution. Okay, so items will be entering in the line level. Okay, items will be entering in the line level. Remaining all will be entering in the header level. The items related amount also will be entering. For that amount, you can give the distribution separately, but a total distribution you can see in the header level also. That's it. Okay, so this is the point. And when we talk about invoice, we discussed the payables time, we discussed about invoice and the process and all. When we talk about this transaction, what is the process? Just we'll create the transaction. We'll create the transaction and we have to complete the transaction. and we'll create accounting. We'll perform the create account. That's it. You say here, I'm just mentioning as create. It can be imported also. You may take from other systems. You may import from order management. Once sales order is confirmed, we discuss notice cycle, right? Based on that, what we discussed notice cycle. Based on ship confirmation, we'll create the sales invoice and receivables. That's what we discussed. Based on ship confirmation, we are creating the invoice, means automatically we'll create invoice in receivables. That only we call as we import the invoice from order management. Based on sales order information, we'll import the invoice into payables, receivables. That's what. So process wise, we may import or we may create the transaction. After that, we have to complete the transaction. Then we'll create accounting. Creation means this information will create. What does it mean by complete? So in GL, when you create the journal, we tested GL journal creation, right? We'll create the journal and after creating journal, what we do? We'll post it. Why we have to post? Let me ask one by one. Why? What is the reason we post the journal? No reason. See, if you are not able to answer for these questions also, you are not doing this course. What you are doing, I can see that, but you are not doing reality. Yeah, tell me. It's a very beginning, right? It's not like just fresh yesterday or today. There could be reasons, but if you are not answering, that's all. You don't see any benefit out of this course. Next one, please. What is the use of journal posting? I clearly explained, not one time, twice, thrice. I was keep explaining at the time.
To maintain the transactions in GL.
If you want to maintain in receivables, you should not post, huh? Then what is the answer?
Generating reports.
No, maybe, but the point which I given, that's very, very specific. Just one term.
Creating the annual reports.
Next. If I don't post, I cannot create. Next one. Simple questions from classes only I am asking. Next one. Completing accounting entries. One word answer. Final post. GL. Final or only final? Final post or only final? What is the purpose we post the journals in GL?
To balance the debit and credit amount for financial.
Uh-huh.
To balance the debit and credit amount.
Already it's getting balanced because we have balancing segment flexible qualifier. We discussed, right? The balancing flexible qualifier will make sure that it is getting balanced. Something wrong, it will stop. It will give the error message and all. Next.
To generate financial reports.
To see the transaction date and amount.
Date and amount. What debit credit? Yeah, just one term.
After posting the results, we can
Correct.
get the data in invoice.
If you post in GL, you will get in payables, invoice. Simple point we discussed. The same I am telling once again. We get our balances will get updated. That's what we discussed, right? For creating journal, if you post the journal, within the journal for which account, I show an example also, right? I created one journal before posting. I taken to inquiry window. There are no balances. After that, again we came back. I posted again. I taken through that inquiry. There we are able to find balance. Then I explained. So this is what the meaning of updating the balances. If you have just journal you saved and all, record will be there. But if the balances what you enter, those cannot be reflected against the accounts which you given. That is the purpose of posting. That's what we discussed. Okay. Anyway, nobody answered. Anyway, good news. Fine. So by posting, we can update the balances against the accounts. The same equal to that here we have a complete. Once we complete the transaction, here I don't say updating the balance accounts. Here, reality it will update the balances, but generally we have to talk. The balances will get updated against the customer. For which customer the balance, the outstanding is applicable and all. Here also balance will get updated. One way against the accounts. Another way, very important point is customer. Customer balance will get updated. Otherwise, I have one transaction. I have one transaction, I didn't complete the transaction, it is just saved. Then balances cannot be reflected to the customer balance. How balance will reflect to customer balances? If the balance are updated against the accounts, the through account balance will get reflected to the customer. Ultimately, the meaning is updating the account balance only. That is the point. So you are saying reports and all, fine. That is the point. Is the reports normally also you will get it, but balance based reports, and if you want to get it, it should be updated. Okay. So first we'll import or create the transaction. Then we have to complete the transaction. More or less complete is equal to post in GL, but payables for receivables point of view call as complete. Once you complete the transaction, then only the balance will get updated. If transaction is completed, then only you can apply the receipt on the transaction. Otherwise, you cannot apply. Payables without validation, you cannot make the payment. The same way here, without completing the transaction, you cannot apply receipt on the transaction. Don't not pieces and all. Give me some statement. Okay. Without completing the transaction, you cannot apply receipt on the transaction. Another point is we'll create accounting, but to apply the receipt on the transaction, accounting is not mandatory. We know the accounting is required basically to create the accounting entries for each and every transaction, which is really required to transfer the data to GL. The purpose is if you don't create accounting, you cannot transfer any information to GL. So that's the reason we'll do accounting. So this is all about transaction process, which we see. Okay, we'll create later that receipt process application. Okay, clear, right? So this is all about. Now these are the simple points you have to understand related to transaction workbench. Transaction workbench. Now we'll talk about receipts workbench. See, not only we are talking about transaction receipts and all. Apart from that, we have many features in AR that I'll list out. First, we'll go with the transaction workbench based concepts, and those will do in the system. After doing that, this transactions, receipts, and remittance, etc. Then I'll introduce other concepts what we have in receivables. We'll discuss. Then we'll proceed on that. Okay. So fine. So when I talk about receipt workbench. It's very simple concept. So basically we have a, let me take the case. Okay, fine, no issues. Take it like we have a basically two type of receipts. Just make a note. Standard receipt, other one is miscellaneous receipts. Okay, we have two type of receipts: standard receipts and miscellaneous receipts. Okay. Standard receipts and miscellaneous receipts. Okay, we'll understand about how these can be classified and what base. Let me take simple example. I have one customer. Okay, I have one customer. This is my regular customer, or else just so very often he may purchase from us, whatever it may be. We have one customer. We have one transaction with a customer. 5,000. Now customer paid. What we will do? We'll create the receipt and will apply the receipt, right? Okay, we'll apply the receipt. We'll apply the receipt on the transaction. Receipt amount also same, 5,000. Done. I got the customer payment. I'm able to apply. What is the reason? I got 5,000. I'm able to apply this receipt on the transaction. Maybe very funny question, but try to answer. I got a receipt from the customer. I got a payment from customer. Because I got a payment, I can create the receipt. In which scenario I cannot apply the receipt on the in which scenario I cannot apply the receipt? Simple. If invoice the transaction information is not there, you cannot apply the receipt. If transaction is there, I can go and apply it, right? If transaction information is not there, I cannot apply. Do you think the business without transaction can we get some payment? What cases? Some cases you said. Which cases? Once just now we discussed, right? Deposit transaction.
Like third-party payment.
Third party payment also will have a transaction. Simple. The amount which you are getting, which is not from our actual business. See, we are selling computers. I'll take simple example. Our business is we are selling the computer sales. We are into computer sales. We are selling the computer. If I am selling the computer to my customers, definitely to which customer I am selling, I'll make a note. Then there will be some due date. Customer will pay that. I'll create as a receipt that I'll be applying. Done. That is our business. That means if you get revenue from your business, generally will have a transaction proper process, proper transaction. Before that, you will create that party as a customer in your system. With that customer, you will create the transaction. From that customer, whatever the amount you get, with that amount, you will create the receipt. The receipt will be applying on the respective transaction. That is very traditional and standard process which you see in the business. But sometimes business may get some miscellaneous revenue. So we are doing the computer sales, and we got some scrap. We got some scrap. Then what we'll do? We'll sell it. I got 100 rupees. What I'll do? I'll ask that person, please tell me your name. I'll create you as a customer. Our separate team is there, customer master team. Okay. If they are going to create the customer, the time what they'll be investing, the process what companies follows who are using ERP, and it may takes like maybe 1,000, 2,000 worth of work. Okay, created. Then again somebody has to create the transaction with 100 rupees. For that, say 200 will be costed. Final how much I received? 100. How much I spent? Something else. Yeah, 7 or 1,000. What is the benefit to the company? But reality anyway, that is again one time we are going to deal with that. So that is the reason. If company is going to get some miscellaneous revenue, it's not required. Okay, it's not required. You have to create the transaction. If I am creating the receipt, I create a receipt. I am applying the receipt on the transaction. What is the meaning of that? I got the payment from customer, I'll create the receipt. If I am applying the receipt on the transaction, what is the meaning of that? Can you tell me the meaning?
Already created transaction.
Yeah, we created already transaction. What is the meaning? I am applying the receipt on the transaction. What is the meaning of that? That means I am just giving the meaning in the system. This payment I received because of this sales, because of this reason, right? That's it. Transaction is open, we are applying, yes, agree. But if you go detail meaning, that is the meaning, right? I received 5,000. Why I received? Because I sold to so and so customer. Within that I have what I sold, when I sold, what exactly. That is the application. That is the meaning again to update the balances on the side. Okay, done. So now, if I am just getting some miscellaneous revenue, 100 rupees, 200 or 1,000 rupees, okay, so I should not create them as a supplier customers in my system, and I don't want to create the transactions in the system. But ultimately, whatever the money you get, there should be some proof, right? Whatever the money, why you are getting, there should be some proof. Why you got, what activity you did. Here when I say I did sales activity, very regular sales activity I did, but I got 100 rupees. Why I got 100 rupees? See, I got 100 rupees. 100 rupees, I'll create the receipt. Why you got this 100 rupees? You have to specify, right? Why you got this 100 rupees? Tell me. Scrap sales, or else you sold some newspapers, old newspapers. You sold for 100 rupees. Okay, some miscellaneous reason. Okay, why you sold? Newspaper sale. Okay, newspaper. You sold some newspaper, which is some miscellaneous revenue for you. Now, this 100 rupees receipt, you have to just relate to this newspaper sale, right? But if you are selling some item, for the item you can have a transaction. Within the transaction, which item you sold, you can specify. That's what we discussed. Item and all you specify within the transaction, the line level. But in this case, you don't have transaction, but still this receipt for purpose you have to specify. For this kind of miscellaneous revenue, when you get miscellaneous revenue, what you can do is instead of creating the transactions and all, you can create, this is one of the activity in the business, right? Newspaper sale also, see, transaction also one activity only, but we are calling as transaction. Other than regular business, whatever you record, those you can call as other activities in your business, but those all are miscellaneous activity. In that case, you sold some newspaper which is not your business. This you can create in the system as a receivable activity. Okay, you can create an activity saying that one receivable, means in receivables you are doing that activity. Receivables department did an activity of selling the newspapers, but that is not a great transaction and all to track very properly the customer and all. Just one activity they did, where they did in receivables. Okay, so that is the reason you'll be specifying the receivable activity name is newspaper sale. Within that activity creation time, you will be giving the account also newspaper sales, or else you may just name it as account as miscellaneous revenue. Now we'll create the receipt. This receipt will apply on the receivable activity. That means there is a proof of how you got 100 rupees, right? Receipt should be applied. If it is a regular general business transaction, receipt should be applied on the transaction. If not transaction, at least there should be some activity which we did, why we got the revenue. So for that you will be creating the receivable activity, and the receipt you will be applying on the receivable activity. If you are getting the money, if you are getting the revenue from your business, okay, when you get the any amount, you will create the receipt, right? But if you are getting the money from your regular business, definitely will be having the transaction, right? So that receipt we'll call as standard receipt. Means from your standard business you are getting the revenue, that is standard receipt. The standard receipt always will apply on the transaction. And if you are going to get revenue from some other sources where that is not your business, okay, in that case that receipt will create as a that's it, miscellaneous receipt. When we create miscellaneous receipt, when we get the miscellaneous revenue, just simple point. Okay, when you get the miscellaneous revenue, against miscellaneous revenue, you will create the miscellaneous receipt. Okay, to record the miscellaneous revenue, we can create the miscellaneous receipt. Okay, to record the miscellaneous revenue, we create miscellaneous receipt. The miscellaneous receipt we have to apply on receivable activity, because of which miscellaneous activity, which miscellaneous activity you got this amount, on that activity you have to apply. That means the amount 100 rupees will go and hit the account which is there in the receivable activity. If you give newspaper sale, that means it will get applied, this 100 we received because of newspaper sale. In case of miscellaneous revenue, you don't need to create the customer and transaction. That's what we are discussing, right? So in case of miscellaneous, you don't need to create any customer. Another side, you don't need to create any transaction. Both are not required at all. And if some company is there, generally this is how the business will be handled. If some company, they are doing some miscellaneous sales, miscellaneous revenue they are getting, still they want to create the customer and they want to create transactions, they want to apply, nobody can stop them. Yes, that is also nothing wrong. But general practice, how it works, for that reason Oracle given this feature. Okay, so that's it. We have a two type of receipts, standard receipt and miscellaneous receipt. In case of standard receipt means when you get the payment from our customer, which is from our business customer. When you get the payment from our business customer, okay, that payment will record as a standard receipt. In case of standard receipt, definitely there should be some transaction. The standard receipt will apply on the transaction. If you get any miscellaneous revenue from any source, we'll create the miscellaneous receipt, and the miscellaneous receipt will apply on receivable activity. Okay, you no need to assign any apply any transaction. If you have a transaction, create this. You don't have any transaction, miscellaneous. Okay, and if you sometimes don't take this as a strong point, if you don't have some transaction, you might have just forgotten to create or something, you go and create, but that is not the case I am explaining here. Okay, the reality as per business process, no transaction you create in the sense, then take into miscellaneous receipt. That's it. Okay, these are the this is all about receipt workbench. Okay, within this we can do different receipt activities. Those we'll discuss when you are working on the system. But for now, these are the points. Just remember. Okay. So in the tomorrow session, we'll discuss further other points and all. Okay. So we'll start with this transaction workbench and receipt workbench. When you are working on this, automatically we'll touch these concepts also. For this separately, we don't need to discuss. When I talk about receivables configuration, then collection related concepts will come into picture. I'll explain. Okay. Fine. That's all. Like these are the simple points to understand about the basic flow of receivables. Then tomorrow session, what we'll do, we'll start doing the system configuration. I'll list out what setups we have to do, which setup for what purpose we'll discuss. Then we can start doing the setups. Then we'll see the transaction creation and receipt creation and all. We'll discuss detail level. Okay. So that's all for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Okay. Fine. Thank you.